Good morning, everybody. It's a grey Thursday morning in Grantham. Welcome to another Canvas Coffee, and today we've got the University College Cork with us. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome Professor Paul McSweeney and Dr. Dave Otway to our session this morning. Good morning, gentlemen. How are you today?
Morning, Jonathan.
Morning, Jonathan. Not too bad.
Not too bad. It's not been the sunny weather that we've been seeing for the last few weeks. I think that's summer over. Although I don't know what it's like in Cork. Beautiful part of Ireland. And it's for people who are online, I did have the pleasure of working with University College Cork over the past year, and had the opportunity to visit beautiful campus. The main area of University College Cork. I absolutely love it when I got to visit and work with the team out there. Paul, what we'd like you to do, just to begin with, if possible, please, can you give us a little bit of a background about the University College Cork, just so that the people who are online, and what we'll do is actually we'll ask in the comments to see where we've got people from and with us this morning. I think we've had sort of people from all over the world over the past few sessions. So if anybody is watching us live, if you'd like to put in the comments where you're dialing in from, that would be fantastic. But if you can give a bit of context about University College Cork for the people that are watching today, or the people that are going to watch this later on when it fits in with their time zone, that would be absolutely fantastic.
Sure, I'm very happy to say a few words about University College Cork, or as we know it, UCC. So the first question is its name, University College. We're actually, the reason why we have that name is that we're part of a federal university, the National University of Ireland. So it's a very loose federation of universities, and de facto are essentially autonomous, but that's where the name comes from. We were founded in 1845, so about 175 years old, which is, I suppose, one of the reasons we have such a pretty campus quite close to the centre of Cork City. About 22,000 students. It's a comprehensive university. We have 4 colleges. We have medicine and health, science and engineering, arts, Celtic studies and social sciences, and then fourthly, business and law, and about 5,000 postgraduate students. I often think, like many second cities around the world, particularly those located near the sea, Cork has quite a unique character. And I think our main campus, as you said, Jonathan, has a great sense of place. And UCC is the acknowledged centre of academic excellence for the south of Ireland, a leading university in the southern part of the state. We do well in the rankings. We have close to 100 million euros of research income per annum, and we're the leader in Ireland for research income from industry. And in 2010, we became the first green campus in the world. And in fact, there's a strong, investment in the environment on campus, and that was reflected in our success in the Times Higher University Impact Rankings, which looks at such matters. We've also a leader in access to third level education. About a quarter of our students are in some way non-traditional college goers, shall we say, for want of a better term. And that, I suppose, reflects our ethos of equality, diversity, and inclusion. But as Vice President for Learning and Teaching, I suppose I should mention that we also have a wonderful culture of teaching and learning on campus. And you might put up that slide I shared with you there, Jonathan, if you could. But for the 2 years it was running, we came in the top 50 in Europe in the Times Higher Teaching Rankings. We run a very successful postgraduate certificate in teaching and learning in higher education. In fact, that is now the single largest postgraduate program in the entire university. We have 120 students registered for that program this year. And adding on to that, we also have a postgraduate diploma in teaching and learning and a master's degree also. And these are taken by a very high percentage of our staff. About 3/4 of our academic staff now have at least a formal qualification in teaching and learning, which is the highest in Ireland. And interestingly, all of these programs are fully online, and they have been online, I might add, for a number of years. It's not just an emergency remote teaching, shall we say. So, we have a lot of activity in the area. Just before Christmas, we dispersed nearly €500,000 of funding across campus for a number of teaching enhancement and learning enhancement projects, which again reflects the great activity that we have. So I suppose that's just a little bit about UCC, and we're delighted to have had the move to Canvas in, I think, 2018, 2019, I think was when we moved. So.
Yeah, that's great, Paul. What I'm thinking is you've just spoken there about the move to Canvas being quite recently, and for this session this morning that we're going to be talking about, with mainly about your switch with sort of the assessment with the current situation, but I'm aware that yourself has taken a lead on sort of the rollout of Canvas over the past couple of years, and that's where I had the pleasure of working, working with your university, working with Tom O'Mara and the great team of instructional designers that he was working with in terms of the rollout. And I also had the pleasure of meeting Dave at the beginning of that process, as being one of the early adopters with Canvas. And we're going to bring Dave into the conversation later on about his use of Canvas, specifically within chemistry and that assessment side of it. But could you sort of just take a few minutes really about, your initial rollout of Canvas and how you approach that? Because I have to admit, I used the University College of Cork as sort of, an example of really good practice in terms of the approach that you took and the sort of the messaging around things. So can you take just a few minutes to explain sort of your rollout process of Canvas?
Sure, yes. I suppose to put it into context first, Jonathan, I'm struggling to remember exactly when our previous VLE, which shall remain nameless, came in, but probably about maybe 15 years ago. And we got off on the wrong foot with it because I think it started as an IT project. And that was one mistake that we did not wish to replicate with Canvas. And that Canvas really started as a teaching and learning project with IT infrastructure kind of implications, obviously, but really very much a teaching and learning project. My apologies for the dog barking in the background if you could hear her. Hopefully she'll take it down. So put into context, we started the process in around 2017, 2018, and it was led by kind of a focus group. It went to tender. So Canvas competed against all of the other competing VLEs, and obviously succeeded. We signed contracts in September 2018, and then we looked at a number of early adopters. And in some ways, I suppose the logic behind this was, to tease out some of the problems that may arise on campus, but also I think to get a kind of some Canvas champions out in the academic schools that would actually, encourage their colleagues to get involved. So we actually went live with Canvas in September 2019, but in the lead up to that, Tom O'Mara, who you mentioned there, and his colleagues in the Centre for Digital Education had a very strong training and support built up. And I suppose in a nutshell, we looked at this again much less as an IT project, much more as a teaching and learning project, but also as a change management project. And that was another thing. And actually, it was very successful. It probably was, Canvas had the huge advantage that our previous VLE was somewhat unloved, shall we say. And I think there was a significant relief on Canvas when we moved to a much smoother, slicker, more intuitive VLE as is Canvas. So that's where we were. I think we were extremely lucky in two contexts, to have made the move to Canvas. In the context of the current crisis around the world, it certainly has facilitated our kind of emergency remote teaching and moving items online. I would have hated to have been in our current situation with our previous VLE. But also the timing that we did it, I think we're very lucky in that a lot of the academics had taken training on Canvas, and we're in a kind of a change mindset for the period of time just before the virus hit UCC.
So, Dave, obviously, I know, Paul, that you teach modules as well at the university, but Dave, you're responsible for, modules within the chemistry, faculty. in terms of that rollout, what was that like from sort of a member of teaching staff's perspective? What sort of things did you find easy? Were there any challenges with that? Was there any sort of, teacher perspective on the way that the rollout was presented to you that you could comment on?
Yeah, I was actually lucky enough to be on the selection panel, so I had a little head start on some of my colleagues, and I could already envisage one of them. I teach and look after first year, and my biggest module is about 300 students, and I could already envisage moving from, we effectively had 2 VLEs. We had one doing our quizzing and one doing our document storage, and so amalgamating all of that and pulling it together, Canvas gave us very quickly. And we were really facilitated by the Centre for Digital Education, Tom O'Mara's group. There was a lot of really good training. We had really good training from yourselves, from Canvas, and the whole change management process was good. People were, as Paul said, very keen to get away from where we were and use something more pedagogical rather than just an IT tool. And Canvas really lent itself to that. We asked during the selection process, we asked some students to get involved, and one of the first things they said was they really liked how easy Canvas was just to navigate. You didn't have layers and layers and layers and layers of folders like we did in a previous VLE, and it just wasn't clunky. It had a really good user interface, and we really liked that. I mean, we compared 4, and yourselves and one other scored highly, but yours was reliably good in every scenario that we wanted. So that's why we went with Canvas in the end.
That's great to hear. I think, the last time that I visited Cork was really, I think it was in February this year. And I know that the sort of current COVID-19 situation, that was when we were starting to sort of hear more and more about this. And I know sort of some of the conversations were starting to take place about that process. And I know at this time of year that the sort of the big part of university life is around assessment. And so we're going to talk about that for a little bit of time. And what we'll do is we'll talk about that from sort of an organizational level of the whole university and the students to begin with. And then what we'll do after that is we'll go into sort of some of the specifics around that with area close to my heart as an ex-science teacher. We'll talk about the way that you've managed to do that, Dave, within the sort of the chemistry courses that you're running. But Paul, sort of with that situation that arose and there need to be a quick move for sort of the assessments to be available online. And I know you said earlier that you were happy that you were with Canvas when this situation arose and the ability to do that. How did you approach sort of this switch to a large amount of assessment, being available to students when they're in completely different locations?
Yes, it was quite a challenge, and to put it into context, I mean, I'm sure individuals were doing online assessments here and there, but I mean, there was no kind of university policy. It wasn't a norm across the university to do online assessments, and I think we all remember, at least in Irish universities, Thursday, the 12th of March, the Taoiseach made an announcement at noon. 12 noon, and our UCC was shut down by 6 p.m. that afternoon. So we had very little lead into it. Well, some people were expecting things to happen, but we were also, the situation was very fluid. We didn't really know how long we might be locked down for. The initial lockdown that was announced by the government was for 2 weeks. Now, I think a lot of people realize it will go on longer than that. So the minute we sat down, I think we were lucky in one sense that we're relatively close to the end of our second semester. There was only 3 teaching weeks left. So very quickly, the problem moved from delivering online emergency teaching. That was very quickly dealt with, and we started looking towards online assessment, because our second semester exam period is usually in the beginning of May. So we're going from the 12th of March to, I think actually it was the 29th of April, I think was our first exam this year. And to cut a long story short, we established an exams continuity group, which had all of the heads of the academic colleges and quite a wide range of people, actually, both from the academic and also from the professional services side, because obviously the actual mechanics of running the exams needed to be looked at. And we took a couple of decisions early on that I think have fared us quite well. First of all, is we decided that insofar as we could, no student would suffer academic disadvantage from this crisis. And the second one was that we actually, kind of devolved changes down to the school levels. We trusted the academics dealing with modules that they were the people who were best placed to decide what is going to be the type of assessment. And that actually encouraged a lot of creativity in assessment. I saw a list of different assessment types from one college there a couple of weeks ago, and there's a huge number of different things I'd never thought of that people are coming up with. So I think that is just the people really, so we didn't impose particular assessments types on the system. That having been said, I think probably most people went in one of two directions: either Canvas quizzes, and I think the quizzing function on Canvas with the huge number of different types of short answer type questions that are available was very, very welcome. And then other people went to one of two other things: either replacing the terminal exam with essay type work, or replacing it with time limited open book exams. And they were relatively straightforward to work through Canvas. So we just completed the exam period now. We had 50,000 examination sittings and very, very little problem. Our students' union did a survey of students, and I think the big majority of students had no problems or very, very minor problems. Those that had more serious problems, the big majority of them actually had nothing to do with the UCC or the university. It was problems with rural broadband and so on. So, we're now looking again. Actually, we're doing some preliminary scoping for online teaching for the first semester in the new academic year, and we'll probably reflect on what we've learned from the exam period that's gone past, with a view to looking at how we're going to run Christmas exams going forward.
Okay, so in terms of sort of the communication with students, sorry, I just got a little echo there. I think I've moved my microphone. In terms of the students, and obviously you've said there that you made that statement, no student was going to be disadvantaged in this process at all. In terms of your communication channels there with the students, where they dispersed and they'd gone to their homes and different places, how did you manage that side of things to get the communications out there and make sure that they were going to be able to access and understand what that process was going to be?
I suppose a couple of comments on that is that, first of all, we had one source of truth. We had a series of keep teaching, keep learning, keep assessing websites. And that was where we directed everyone, both staff and students, so that there wouldn't be other information going on. Our Students' Union were very helpful, I must say. Our Students' Union Education Officer got the message out very, very quickly. The students themselves were obviously familiar with Canvas. Some of them may already have done Canvas quizzes, but there was a very high proportion of them would be familiar with the mechanics of uploading material to Canvas. We actually used a kind of a virtual exam answer booklet, shall we say, as well, to give some structure to the exam. So that basically was almost like a mock cover of a normal exam book, where the students put in their details and so on, and continued typing afterwards. We made very clear that all materials submitted by students would be scanned for plagiarism by Turnitin, which is what we usually use for such matters. And then our media and communications, they just kept getting simple messages out there. So a very early message that went out was that all assessments for the first semester will be online. And then the details went out. And I must say, actually, individual academics, individual module coordinators were instrumental as well in explaining the details for their particular module.
Okay, I think that leads us nicely into sort of, Dave being with us this morning. you know, we're talking generally sort of as the organization there with those communication channels and things along those lines, but specifically within, you know, your subject, Dave, you know, how did you sort of manage that sort of switch to assessment process, make sure that students were prepared for that assessment process with that transition that was coming through? You know, and as we go through, if you've got, I know you've brought some specific examples to sort of share of what you've been doing in Canvas around that as well this morning, but do you want to take us through that and how your sort of you know, your role and how you led, like Paul's mentioned there, in charge of your courses for the assessment? Okay.
So we finished on campus on Thursday the 12th. I was due to start with my 200 odd, 300 odd first years on Monday, immediately after that. So 2 days after we were pivoting, I was literally about to start lecturing them in our main Bull lecture theatre. And, you know, so I was already mentally prepared and had my information ready in Canvas. And again, fortuitously, I was an early adopter, so the exact same module I'd run the year before. So I had a little bit of a head start on what I knew I wanted to do. And we used the visualization and the front end of Canvas, made sure that everything was kind of uniform, good colors, able to access the mobile side. Most of the students, to be fair, are using mobiles rather than laptops for the initial access or during class time access. Just an anecdote, we used to tell students to turn off mobile phones or threaten to put them in a bucket of water, but these days, well, it was, you know, but these days, you know, you kind of have the expectation that save trees and not print out pages and pages. You've got it on your phone and you can access things, whether it's the periodic table or whatever, in the class. So the fact that the apps work well with the content, that it's seamless, that you don't have to rethink everything, enabled us to use the Canvas announcements to contact the class very, very quickly. Like I said, I pivoted and went online, and I tried to keep to the schedule. So my lecture was 12 o'clock on the Monday after the pivot online, and I started at 12 o'clock. I let the students know by email. I contacted the year group leaders by Facebook, and also via Snapchat, and also via Canvas, you know, trying to cover everything. So got everybody into the system, told them I'd try online. On the way out the door on the 12th, I borrowed one of these from AVMS, which is a visualizer, because luckily they had one spare from refurbishing another lecture theatre. And I know I was lucky to get one, because I use that to write in a book, because chemistry is very visual. So I had my front end of Canvas set up, my module. We call it a module, but you would call it a course, just to get the nomenclature right. Yeah. So my course set up with its modules, which is our module, and then a hierarchy showing what I wanted the students to see, print, read, some anecdotal videos, you know, some AC/DC or some, something different, or some chemistry reactions, and worked examples and a small lecture. And again, fortuitously, I had last year, as an early adopter, recorded my lectures with Panopto via Canvas. So I had those pre-armed, so I could allow the students to pre-watch. Now, to be fair, I tried to use the inbuilt collaboration with Canvas, which was Big Blue Button, but we only have basic subscription for that, which after about 50 users basically just went, and that was what it was. And I realized we couldn't record for posterity, so we'd recently moved to Teams through Microsoft, and I was able, again through Canvas, because Canvas had just then integrated Teams into itself, to connect the group of students with Teams and use Teams as my kind of visual front end, use the camera and the side camera to go through things. I could also use PowerPoint to talk through those things. Now, that was the lecture itself, and the key there was to try and break it down rather than a 1 hour spiel and that kind of thing, and make it more interactive. And also to be there pastorally, because this was all just like the weird newness for all of us. We were, you know, I didn't know whether my broadband would work. Half the students probably didn't know. We were communicating by Messenger, by all sorts of means, and the chat functions and the inbox in Canvas. keeping to my schedule, which again I could use Canvas to do with the calendar, and it was just a surreal, but it worked. And once we'd moved to the integration of Teams, just because we didn't have the subscription with Big Blue Button, that then worked really well. And again, luckily the students had been doing the module for the first part of the semester, and so they were well used. We have weekly tests for assessing the students already built in, as Paul mentioned, inside Canvas. Now I can show you some of my slides and some.
Yeah, it'd be really good to see.
So this is my landing page, and the module we're talking about here is this fundamentals of chemistry. And when the students fire in, they just get a very simple interface with our announcements at the top. So this is how I was getting students to realize what we were doing. And then they just throw themselves in here into the lectures tab. And this is broken down into our sections, weekly quizzes. We even ended up with our summer final exam in there. And so there's these aren't folders, these are movable tabs. So this is my lectures, for instance, and specific things as PDFs rather than PowerPoints. The announcements worked well. Like I said, my Panopto recordings were already captured, so I was able just to copy them from the previous year. No, it's not ideal, and obviously some of it's a bit anecdotal because it's the years before, but that worked well. And then our assignments, every week there would be a small piece of homework and a quiz which you could wander the students through. And that worked really, really well as an ongoing flow process. As Paul mentioned with the exam, the final summative exam, so I had 3 weeks of teaching, a couple of weeks of kind of tutorials over the Easter holidays, and then our exam. And this module lended itself as a first year module to being an MCQ, multiple choice question exam. We had to be careful, and we had a lot of discussion inside the School of Chemistry and with support from the Centre for Digital Education about how we should phrase this, how the questions should be done. We added some extra time to allow for technical issues with the actual taking of the exam. But we kept to our schedule because the students were already told a month before we went online when their exams would be. So we tried to keep to the scheduled times of exams so everybody knew where they would have to be and not leave them open for the whole day and make them kind of rigorous. And our exams, worked well, and we ended up with very similar averages to before. And as I think Paul already mentioned, the major technical difficulties were either people's Wi-Fi or the electricity board turning off the power, or because changing meters over here, those kind of random things. There was the odd issue with certain images. We found that, for instance, that a particular new iteration of Safari didn't play well on some Mac OSs, and it's always better, it seems, to use Chrome or Firefox with Canvas, and I would always suggest that myself.
Okay. Actually, I'm just thinking there about the sort of getting that audio coming through again on there. Let me move this microphone away. I think in terms of, like you've said there around the communications, around the browsers and things along those lines, and I don't know if you did this on your side, but obviously we've got people looking. We've got Australia and New Zealand seems to be well represented today on the session. But what we'll do is if we pop up, there is a link actually for the Canvas community, which has guides around things like the browsers and things that other users who are online, other institutions, if they're using that, they can get sort of the guides around the browsers and things like that to send out to their students if need be. So, yep, the link's popped up on the bottom as we've got there. So community.canvaslms.com, loads of guides in there around the things that Dave's talking about, and also about the browsers which should be used and things like that, so that can be shared with people. So sorry for interrupting you there, Dave, about that, but it is one of the common ones, isn't it? And it's those issues lie often elsewhere with things such as, like you said, you can't account for somebody having their electricity meter changed, or the broadband issues, which I think have happened in a lot of places at the moment. But these quizzes then, and that so what you're saying is the sort of the grades and the averages you're getting are similar to what you had previously when you did the assessment with this. How students respond to that to that going online? Did they give you any sort of specific feedback about the way that things had changed at all around it?
Yeah, we during one of the clever things we did was we decided in our school to give the students test exams the week over the Easter holidays in the weeks before. So for first years, we decided multiple choice questions were, but not just taking 15 questions and giving those. We generated, myself and my colleagues in the School of Chemistry generated question banks, which enabled us to properly assess their knowledge and their understanding, rather than just all having the same questions and being able to plagiarize and exactly those kind of things, because they'd all be online.
Okay, have you got that loaded up? I'm wondering if we share your screen again, if with the item banks, just to show sort of how.
Yeah, so we designed these questions, like you said, and rather than just being one set of 15 questions that we'd leave up for the students, and they'd all take snapshots off on their phone. We've got to be realistic that students will share and help learn, and the help learning and the group learning is important, but in a kind of final exam, it is definitely better to try and get their individual understanding. So the question banks enabled us to tease that out, and so we for instance would have 25 questions, and these are important. Remember to label things properly so you can find them, and again, the very nice thing about the Canvas quizzing tool is it enabled us to A, generate the question banks, and B, then set up the quiz that it would take one question from each bank, randomize the questions and randomize the answers. The students weren't necessarily happy about that because it obviously constrained them, but it definitely helped us with their understanding and knowledge. Just as an example, this is one of the particular questions from Organic. So that's kind of where we could have, and it would jumble up the answers and jumble up the questions, so you wouldn't get 200 people all looking at the same thing at the same time, asking their questions. So for first year, we went with that. For our later years, second, third, and fourth year, we'd already had our exams go through a very rigorous external examinations process. So we used those with a gentle nuance and put them online as PDFs and Word documents, and we then got the students to write on paper as they normally would in an exam situation, rather than trying to get them to draw chemical structures and submit and do everything else electronically. They would handwrite all of their answers and then upload them again through a Canvas into the grade center, and we then used very nicely the speed grader to be able to mark those exams, which worked really, really well. We got some very good rigorous marking, which allows us transparency both backwards and forwards for the examinations process. Your question about what we then asked our students about 2 weeks after the exams, some very open questions. There wasn't any guidance on this. The questions were just, there were 6 questions. The first was, what did you find helpful and effective in the 3 weeks that we were online? And this is all from within Canvas, just don't mention that. So there's no specific, we didn't find Canvas helpful because Canvas was where everything was based from. So, and again, just a rider is, first years did see Panopto more than fourth years. In fourth years, the lecturers may have used PowerPoint voiceovers more often. Okay. So, but as a generality across our first, second, third, and fourth years, what worked well was recorded video with a live nuance and a chat, but also regular quizzing and detailed notes. That was one question. What didn't work well was that when there wasn't any recordings or there wasn't any discussion and there weren't any practice questions, so the exact opposite of what we thought worked well. In terms of any assessment issues, what we found with the assessment issues was actually most people found it went okay. And I think that was important to capture, is that most stuff did go okay. When I say more flexibility, that would mean around the questions. Some students did feel that there was some better communication, and that doesn't mean about necessarily the actual what was happening, when was happening. It would be around there was more material, and that should be, or maybe they wanted more one-to-one interaction, and we should do more questions going forwards. This slide probably captures the biggest issues, which are what people found were the real challenges. And as we've already mentioned, most of the challenges, because we're all dumped in this new situation, were around Wi-Fi and technology. So your computer not working, your Wi-Fi dropping out, the broadband going, the power going. And then the second most important thing was people just not having space. I mean, I'm lucky I have a room here. I can shut my 7-year-old out and tell her to watch the homeschool hub on Irish television here, which is brilliant. But a lot of people are very busy environments, so that was what caught them mostly. Finally, going forwards, what people wanted us to do was maybe thinking about next year is to use a blend of live lectures with Panopto recordings, all done through Canvas, scheduled and keeping to the timetable, using Teams as or it could be Big Blue Button if we went that direction, as an interactive thing, and then also maybe a backup of PowerPoint voiceovers.
So there's a bit that indication there of sort of the freedom that people want with their learning, with the different resources that they're going to use.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm getting the echo today. I don't know what I've done with my microphone. I should maybe have gone for the headphones. I think that's the way to do
technology,
it.
Hey, that's like I said, there's the thing that catches most people.
One of the slides that you've got, a couple up from that, one of the sort of points that was made about it was, I think it's that one. If you go down just one more down, please. There's comments there around sort of that missing classmates and the social interaction and stuff and things like things along that. Is there anything sort of as a university that you were able to sort of support that, or in the future, do you think if there is going to be more sort of online learning, do you think there's anything around there that universities should be doing to sort of counter that situation? It's like you've said, Dave, isn't it? It's great. I've got sort of my home office and room that I can come into, to get on with the work, and obviously, family are at home for me to go and work with them. But it is a completely different situation. You are on your own. So, are there any considerations around that for the future? I don't know if Paul or Dave has any ideas about.
I might just say a few words on that. We're currently at the moment doing kind of scenario planning and contingency planning for the first semester of the next academic year, starting in September, and that is one of the biggest things that we're challenging. That's the biggest challenges that we have. That university life is more than just modules and chemical structures and all those things. There's a lot of other things, particularly in Cork, because we actually have a pretty campus and there's a great campus buzz, shall we say. And, we're very conscious, particularly of our first year students coming into us, that they're coming in from a very, very disrupted end of their second level education. The national exam, the Leaving Certificate, the national exam that determines university entry has been cancelled and has been replaced by predicted grades, and there was a long saga behind that. So, they're going to come in then to a very different university environment. Usually the transition into higher education can be difficult enough at the best of times. So we're trying to give as much of our to get as much support around that as possible, both in terms of study skills. We have quite an active skills centre that looks at study skills and those types of details, but also just more generally trying to prioritize. We won't know exactly probably for a while what the social distancing guidelines that we'll be facing come September are, but we're kind of moving in the direction of basically having a default position of delivering the lecture component online, but then trying to get as much campus access as we possibly can for the students to try and build up that. It'd be particularly a challenge, I'd say, for Dave and his colleagues in the sciences around labs, delivering labs, and the clinical teaching as well, and performance and a whole pile of other things. And I think we're going to try and ring fence that as much as we can to try and keep that experience possible, because that is a lot of the social, other than the clubs and societies, I think a lot of the social interaction comes in those small group scenarios, be it the field trips or the labs or whatever. And so I don't know the answers to the question yet, or at least we're very clear that there is a question to be answered.
No, that's great. No, I fully understand that answer, and it's just interesting. I think, and it is the situation, isn't it, in educational institutions? We don't always have the answer straight away, but we do need to ask that question early on and not ignore it. And it just interested me, with that coming up on the survey, that the students had sort of highlighted that. And and the other thing that I think is great is the fact that as you said, as Dave's demonstrated there, that student opinion really counts, and and we're looking at that information, and you're making your decisions based on that feedback from the students, because they're the best people to give you the idea of what the experience is actually like. And and I noted earlier that Paul, you mentioned about the student union being involved in the communications, and I'm very aware at the beginning of your project, some fantastic students at your student union involved in the communications and about the switch to Canvas as well. So that's one of the things that I think should be highlighted about University College Cork, how there is that. It really feels like that relationship is there, between the teachers and the students, and it's a partnership in learning, and it's a pleasure to see, really.
Definitely, yeah.
I'm looking at some of the questions that come up, and I don't want to shy away from questions that people are asking us within the comments, but there's one from Ben, which is about sort of the online assessment and recordings and about improving those. And I know Dave's, possibly partly answered this with things such as the recordings of lessons. You've used Panopto, you've got the opportunity to do that with Teams and then sort of present that on Canvas with that way. So, you're using third-party plugins, with Canvas being open to do that side of it. But in terms of sort of, your assessments for the future, things you would want to change, because obviously these decisions have been made quite quickly at the moment for assessment this time round, and there is a continuous learning experience. What would you say, Dave, are the things that you want to improve, or you would do differently with the assessments, things that would be better for that sort of student assessment experience?
Well, as a chemist, and I'll label it that as a header, I'd love to see something like a chemical drawing tool that was smart and understood and was able to do that. Now, there are ways of doing that, and there are potential LTI integrations that would allow us to do that. In terms of the assessment and recordings of classes, I do think it works well. We need to think, probably from a pedagogical point of view, rethinking the lecture. It's a big topic on social media and in the whole teaching arena. This may be an opportunity to rethink the lecture. Maybe it would be made into smaller bundles, and or even within your lecture give, which a lot of us do, but give small snippets, assess, use. Again, plugins, whether it's a quizzing tool, Mentimeter, Kahoot, or other things. I ended up using the chat function in Microsoft Teams and using the thumbs up or the sad faces to assess whether students understood on the fly, just because it was, how can I do this? I thought, well, it's just a good way. They're all used to, on Facebook or Snapchat, smiley faces or sad faces. So using that as a very quick polling tool worked really well, and I was able to capture all of that. So that's not gone. That's still there.
And I think, I'm thinking back actually to some of the previous live streams that we've done where we've been talking about video. We had Jess Jones on last week, who's, I think she came out to Cork actually and delivered one of the training sessions early on. But we were talking about, you've got the videos, they're in the different locations of the lectures. If you have got them, it's sometimes, well, what do you want students to do with that afterwards? And, I think one of the things I like about Canvas with that, and where I've seen in certain circumstances, are, okay, the lecture's finished, but the discussion hasn't finished. So people placing those videos from either Panopto, if that's where they've got it with the plugins, or if they've got that as a file that they upload into Canvas and students can access on the mobile, they're placing that in discussions so that students can then continue the basically the discussion afterwards once they've, they're in different places, and we also talked about that being in with quizzes. So I think there's options, around that there. And yeah, with the science thing, I think the drawing and those sort of tools. There's always things, and they're the things that we'd love to get sort of developed.
So on that point, I teach one full online module in dairy chemistry, as it turns out, and it's aimed at dairy industry professionals working in industry all over the country. And before I started, I had this kind of vision of them, putting their kids to bed at 8 o'clock at night and going into their room and studying and down my lectures. But the feedback I got was that quite a high proportion of them were actually studying or listening to my lectures in the car driving to work in the morning. That's the great thing about it. It kind of frees up. You could have students listening to recorded lectures in the gym, out walking, in a very different format to the way that we'd had before.
Yeah, no, I love that. That story. It's when people are listening to the audio and it does give the opportunities like that, doesn't it? And like you're talking there about professionals, business schools, executives, people traveling around. I've seen universities creating sort of the lectures and the quizzes in short snippets like Dave spoke about, because when they looked at their sort of analytics of when the system was being accessed, they'd realized actually the students were using buses a lot to get into the school. And so basically it was a quick thing on the way home, set that as the homework, and the students liked it because they could work and get some work done, and get it ticked off that they'd done that task. But it's accessible when they're actually on the move as well. So, great sort of stories there. I've got one question. We've spoken a lot about sort of the science side of this, that's sort of all of our background, to be honest, this morning. In terms of as a university, though, you've had, overall what you're describing, Dave, as a positive experience. Paul, you're saying that, the experiences that you're hearing around have been mainly positive. How do different departments and faculties sort of share that learning and, collaborate around that? Because there's obviously things that we can do in sciences that may transfer and be useful in other areas. Do you have anything in place for that sort of sharing around the university?
I think we do, yes. I mean, in a number of different ways. I mean, there's a lot of informal sharing within colleges, which are kind of groups of cognate schools, of academic schools. So there's probably a lot of unofficial stuff in cups of coffee or virtual cups of coffee being discussed there. But I mean, I would also just mention the training courses run by our Centre for Digital Education, headed up by Tom O'Mara, who's very active on the chat, I see at the moment. But also our Centre for Integration, Centre for the Integration of Research and Teaching and Learning, our Teaching and Learning Centre, which has a very strong mission for learning enhancement, runs a number of kind of short type, kind of lunch type seminars where a lot of this learning is kind of shared between different academics. I said there's a quite a vibrant teaching and learning culture on campus. So I'm not always aware of a lot of the interactions, but there's a lot of things happening on the ground.
Yeah, the CERTL, the centre is excellent and bringing people together. And Tom's group, and we have bite-sized sessions, just 15 minutes on how to use a testing tool and how to ask questions and those kind of things. So just a 15-minute bit on 5-10 slides. As an early adopter on Canvas, I gave one of those talks. Here's a 15-minute, and it was Dave's do's and don'ts on Canvas type thing. So it enabled people just to see the mistakes, as you do, learning all the time, the mistakes that you learn from to share with your colleagues. And that would be people from all the way across campus, from nursing and arts and everywhere. So, we do, as Paul says, have our own little collegiate groups, but there is up and down the dispensation of knowledge and information.
No, that's great to hear. And I think that is, that's why we're running these sessions as well, to share the ideas across people across the world. And I think that's it's the way forward, isn't it? It's those shared ideas just improve the experience for everybody else. And these students coming through, and the social impact that has is massive. I'm sort of conscious of the time that we've taken today, and so obviously we'll need to take some questions if there are any that people want to ask. We'll see if any do come into the live comments, and I see that Tom has been, like we said, he's been putting things in there for people that they can access and have a look at. If I was asked you to that question, what do you see your next steps? I'll ask both of you this question. Paul, from the, with your role in, the learning and teaching for the whole organization, and Dave, within your role specifically for the modules that you're responsible for, what's going to be the next things that you do?
Well, I think for us, first of all, in the middle of this current crisis, there's one thing I'm certain of, is that teaching and learning will never be quite the same again after this. I mean, we've done things here that, over the last couple of weeks, really, that have been in people's minds for a long time, but, the fear factor is gone. The fear factor for online assessment, which was very real, it was gone because, frankly, it just had to be gone. We had no other choice, and it's very interesting. When you really have no other choice and your back is to the wall, then a lot of options suddenly become very, very valuable. Now, if you ask me for specifically for UCC, I mean, we are a campus-based university, and I don't think we're ever going to go online in the grand scheme of things, large numbers. I think what our future will be blended, and I think when the dust settles on the current crisis, you'll see a lot more blended elements coming into modules that are largely delivered in the traditional way, and that'll be very, very positive. And you'll see a lot more experimentation in terms of different forms of assessment. One of my colleagues mentioned recently that that basically for UCC we've been using largely the same form of assessment for 175 years. Students in exam halls writing. And, if you think of it, the only time actually our students actually write now is largely in exams, and I think, there was a lot of people were kind of, saying, we must do something about this. We must do something about this. We never actually got further than those types of conversations until the lockdown happened and we got hit by the virus. And now I think you're going to see a lot more experimentation, maybe looking at lockdown browsers for invigilated exams in the future. In some areas that might be something, but I think a lot keyboard skills for students now are probably at least as comfortable as actually writing. Grading exam scripts online, I think again that would not have been a practice in UCC in the past. Well, obviously it is now. So I think a lot more innovative forms of assessment, of teaching and learning, and that's the silver lining in the current cloud, shall we say?
I think I agree with you completely, and I think what you've said there actually carries over many sectors of education as well, isn't it? Like you say about the writing, it is, really it's building up to an exam, and when is the other situation that people are going to handwrite like that? No, thank you for that answer. Dave, within chemistry then, what's the next steps really that you're going to look at?
Well, we've just this week put together a couple of working groups to look at how we're going to go forward. One from the general teaching point of view, which we only started yesterday, and the second thing is the labs, and obviously the whole lab scenario, whether we have some instruction online. All our courses are accredited by the Royal Society of Chemistry, so we have a duty to actually train our students with practical skills as part of their accreditation, and that's true across a number of the professional degrees, like pharmacy and nursing and medicine. So how we do that is a discussion that's very upfront in our minds, and we're looking at, are there ways of using particular sources of information or particular add-in products and LTIs to get some of the knowledge whilst we're online and blended, and with a view to come the new academic year socially distanced labs or socially distanced environments. That's the biggest question, because we've as Paul says, we've shown that we can do this. No, it's not ideal, and as Paul says, we'll never go completely online. I don't think it will be a blend, because the students and us, I think, miss the social interaction, the spark, the whole discussion. This is good. I mean, it's nice and clear, but not everybody has good broadband. Not everybody has the ability. Some people don't have computers or even good iPhones, or they've dropped their camera too many times after a night out, and they can't take pictures of their scripts. So there is a lot of things to work on, but we're getting there. Labs is mine, and the science is the biggest potential question, but also thinking about more continuous assessment and more of a blend of assessment, rather than it being that big shock that you suddenly have to write for 3 hours.
Yeah.
When all you've done is type a few things into the computer or pick a few things on it. So those kind of things is definitely up for discussion.
Yeah. No,
interestingly, where we rolled out an assessment strategy for consultation there a couple of months ago, and one of the items on that was actually to have a university policy of moving away from terminal exams in the first semester or first year in particular, largely just, I think, to kind of almost get the students' minds away from the way they were learning in second level, which is very much learning towards an exam, a huge high stakes terminal exam, the leaving certificate taken at the end of school, and try and ease them into a different way of learning. And I think that you'll see more of that even in the coming first semester. I think you'll see that coming as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you, gentlemen. I'm conscious of the time of where we're at this morning. We'll just see if we'll just give it a minute to see if anybody does have any specific questions that they want to put into the chat. I know Ben had asked a question, and I think we've possibly answered that. I think we've answered that one around the recordings and the classes, and I know that Tom's put extra sort of information for people in the chat there. But we'll see if anybody gives us any more questions.
And maybe while we're waiting for them, just remind again any viewers on this that we have a very active postgraduate certificate in teaching and learning in higher education that's fully online, and we've actually had quite a number of students from well outside Ireland taking it. So if you want an internationally recognised professional qualification in teaching and learning in higher education, then please do come to us, and it's all delivered through Canvas.
Let me pop that. I can pop that up on the. Once again, if anybody's joined us, so I'll just see if we can get my screen shared around that, and then there is one question that we'll go through. We'll just see if we can get this put up. Yeah, so for anybody that was interested in the qualification that Paul's spoken about, the details are there. There is a comment from Catherine. The key here is also how to foster engagement in the online space, the use of synchronous and asynchronous delivery. And I agree with that comment completely. I think that is huge. It is getting that balance and that blend between the synchronous and the asynchronous that you've spoken about. And that sort of seems to be the direction you're going in with your questions, of working out that blend between those two different sort of learning areas there. So I think, a really valid point there from Catherine about that one. I'm really sorry. I'm afraid we are up for time this morning. I'd love to continue this conversation with both of you. I really enjoyed talking with you and the approach that you're taking there in Cork. For that sort of student experience on learning. It's been an absolute pleasure, gentlemen. I hope we get to meet again in person at some point, either if I can get another trip to Cork, or hopefully at some point in the future our conferences will be maybe face-to-face as well. I know we're going online this year, but it's been an absolute pleasure. I want to thank you for taking the time for this, and I wish you well.
Thank you.
It's great, and thank you again, Jonathan.
Thank you. Okay, so bye-bye to everybody online, and bye-bye.